Hello and welcome, stargazers, to another illuminating episode of the Outlaw Astrology Podcast. I'm your intrepid star guide, APM, and today we're continuing our archetypal journey through the zodiac with Leo, the sovereign self. Before we step into the golden light of Leo's realm, a quick reminder to rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Helps our cosmic community grow, and check out our Substack for deeper explorations of all things cosmic. And now let's discover how to claim our rightful throne in the kingdom of authentic expression. A quick note, all links are always going to be in the show notes if I've not said, so you can find the link to our Substack and any other links in the show notes as per usual. So, we're going to call this the Royal Flame Within. Now, previous to the Leo episode, we looked into Aries all the way up until this point, and what we're doing is the hero's journey, as popularized by Joseph Campbell in his Hero with 1,000 Faces. And so we're looking at the zodiac as a form of storytelling. And each sign builds on the sign previously, which is why I'm doing the hero's journey in zodiacal form, is so that you can see that energy building. We all have Virgo, we all have Leo, we all have all these archetypes in our charts. We just have them in different houses and different planets and points, and making different aspects will be there. So Leo energy is, I would consider, kind of like what people might call main character energy, but here's how it goes. Every hero's journey reaches a pivotal moment where they must recognize and claim their unique gifts. So Leo represents that crucial phase. It's the awakening to our essential creative power and purpose. So like the sun that stands at the center of our solar system, I would say located, we must too learn to shine without apology or diminishment. Now, if Cancer before made us more emotionally aware and therefore hopefully emotionally intelligent, we are transversing our inner landscape via Cancer, and now that integration, that emotional granularity is making us more aware of what choices we can make and how we want to show up. How do we want to turn up in life? How do we want to navigate life? And that's Leo's energy, is that royal flame within us. It's very fiery, very fixed energy. And in ancient traditions across cultures, there is a solar deity, and that is represented not just by light, but consciousness itself. So, when we embody Leo energy at its highest, wherever it happens to be in our chart, whatever aspects the planet in Leo or the ruler of that house, and in that Leo in whatever house, and its ruler, the sun, wherever it happens to be, we're learning to become more conscious creators rather than unconscious reactors, okay? So solar consciousness asks us to recognize that our authentic self-expression is not self-indulgence, but a sacred responsibility. So the cosmos is expressing itself through our unique configuration of gifts. That's what you might call a star chart, an astro blueprint, etc. Okay? And so we're looking at some of those deities. Let's step into one completely. So, Egyptian, we have Ra, and sometimes it'll be called Pharaoh. Why? Because thousands of years ago, the Pharaoh or the king ruled by divine right was considered the embodiment, and this is the way I'm choosing to phrase this, the embodiment of God or the divine upon the earth. They ruled by divine right, meaning that God or gods put them on the throne, and they were worshipped in a lot of cultures as if they themselves were gods or the embodiment of a certain god. So in Egypt, the pharaoh was considered a living embodiment of the sun god Ra. So Amun Ra, by the way, if you ever Amun, comes back from that far. And when the pharaoh became too prideful or forgot their responsibility to maintain the cosmic balance, or Ma'at, which is also an Egyptian goddess, chaos would ensue. And so these stories teach that true divine kingship comes from service, or is more leaning toward the collective rather than self-aggrandizement. And so the pharaoh's journey represented the balance between divine power and human humility. Keeping in mind that also in those cultures, those people who were the next rung down from the divine, which was the king, the god, the queen, were held to a different standard than the average, the common person. They were expected to be role models for how to navigate society, for how to exist in that society, etc., which is something we don't do at all in our current society. So the king would be held to a standard and would be the role model that everyone would look to of how divinity looks as it walks upon the earth. Okay, so that is one of the solar deities that we see, and how to be responsible, how to use this energy responsibly. So the universe is expressing itself through us, the cosmos is, or the multiverse, whatever your choice, or God through us, and we have a responsibility to channel those talents, those gifts, those strengths in a way that's going to benefit us as well as the collective, and the collective as well as us. It's not an either-or thing. It is a both-and thing, and it's something that increasingly we become aware of as we journey toward Pisces. So right now we're in Leo, and so here's a thing. There's a shadow to this. Of course there's a shadow. And the path to true sovereignty is fraught with the shadow aspects of Leo energy. Every sign of the zodiac has a shadow. And so with Leo, there are temptations, pride, arrogance, and the desperate need for external validation. Now, that energy reminds me of a tarot card, and that's the Devil card. And when you hear temptations, you want to be, it's yes, temptation, but it's also liberation. How can you liberate yourself from pride? What are you, now necessarily, I should step back and say this. Pride in and of itself is not a terrible thing. Pride is what makes us say, I contribute this, and I've given the best of my ability, and I expect to be compensated on that level. That is pride. Pride also makes us likely to advocate for ourselves, which we will explore further when we get to Virgo. So pride in and of itself is not a necessary thing. It's when that pride leads to arrogance. And arrogance, how I define it, is when we forget that there are other people in the world, and we just do things without considering that other people might be impacted. Whether, impacted by our actions. And we're not talking about happily, we're talking about for ill. To be aware as much as possible, that some of our actions other people might interpret as harmful. So if we decided to pick up and move across the country, and we have a long-term relationship, that long-term relationship that we have with this other person, they might see that as harmful, especially if they want to maintain the relationship. And so when we're talking about Leo energy, it is walking through the world going, okay, as per the example I just stated, I feel the need to expand. I feel the need to illuminate. I feel the need to shine the light into the world. By the way, the sun is the illuminator. It lights things up. Wherever it is in the chart, it is illuminating. It is bringing to consciousness something. And the sign, that and house will give you an idea of the themes that are being brought to consciousness. because the sun lights up the same way the moon reflects. The moon is a mirror. The sun illuminates, Jupiter expands, Saturn restricts. You get the picture. All the planets have an action that they're known for. So you might consider Leo energy as learning how to illuminate without scorching the land or the planets surrounding, because that would be detrimental to life. So you might see that what I just said is metaphorically as an archetypal journey, learning to shine our light in a way that is life-giving and life-affirming rather than harmful and detrimental. And to the point is that we have to experiment, because fiery energy is very experimental and enthusiastic. So yes, wherever heat is involved and the sun is hot, people potentially can get burnt. And they're meaning that metaphorically, mistakes are going to be made. You know, it's when you're cooking, for example, you know, when you're going out in the world, if you paint, you're going to get paint all over yourself. If you cook, you're going to burn something. If, you know, etc. So understanding that, learning how to use Leo energy in a way that's helpful and beneficial and not harmful is going to take a lot of experimenting, exploring, and patience. And so what we're looking at is not just looking at, you know, the temptations of pride, arrogance, and a desperate need for external validation, because these are not flaws that need to be condemned or fixed. Because I do not believe that we can just pop a pill and fix our essential nature. That's not how it works. If it worked that way, it would work that way. Okay? So this is not about fixing and not about condemning. It's mostly just about learning. These shadow temptations, these temptations that exist in shadow, can be teachers on our journey to right use of power. Right use of our shining our light, our gifts, our talents, our blessings upon the world. Also, Leo has an affinity for the strength card because it features a lion, but it's also using kindness in addition to your strength. So it's tempering that life-giving light with more grounded and slower processes so that we're making the impact we want to make and we're benefiting rather than harming. Okay, so we can consider let's look at a few more myths across cultures. So we have divine kings and queens, and some of these people fail through hubris only to rise again through humility, or they just fall. So let's look at another myth. Now we're going to be looking at Celtic British, and this is Arthur, and that would be King Arthur, that king. And King Arthur's story perfectly embodies the Leo journey. His rise to greatness through pulling the sword from the stone represents claiming one's authentic power. However, Arthur's kingdom fell apart when ego, meaning represented by his pride and blindness. So when people say ego, let us understand that what they're usually speaking of are the negative shadow aspects that all of us have and all the signs of the zodiac have. That sometimes when we are tired, hungry, overworked, burnt out, stressed out, distracted, not dissociated, not feeling at home in our bodies or not feeling present in our body. He says when we are most likely to experience the shadow versions of all of the zodiac, including Leo. We're more likely to be arrogant and to seek far too much external validation when we are feeling less centered in ourselves or less present or less confident in who we are. There are going to be times when we don't feel as confident because self-esteem and self-worth are fluid. They don't stay stuck as a fixed absolute. They shift and change depending on the people and the circumstances and the time in our lives. Okay? So, when we are looking at Arthur's story, his kingdom fell apart when pride and an inability to see the truth of things and the truth of people made everything fall apart. And we're talking about Mordred, because Mordred betrays Arthur, which kind of reminds me of another story in which a close friend betrayed somebody, and we all know how that worked out, and we all know the story I'm referencing. But there's a betrayal, which leads to the downfall of everything, which is what happened in that previous story as well. So this pride that Arthur had overshadowed the higher purpose. And so his final journey to Avalon suggests the transformation and the integration of wounds into wisdom, and that is a true sovereign's path. So, let's look again. So, when we're looking at the sovereign self, we want to understand that hubris can be detrimental. And so if we look from Gilgamesh to Arthur, we realize that genuine leadership, and Leo energy is very leadership energy, emerges not from dominating but integrating. And so the sovereign self emerges when we can hold opposites together. So our magnificence, our mortality, our power, our vulnerability are held in the same vessel, which is our bodies, our minds, our souls, our spirits. Okay? And so let me share another myth. And here is Icarus, Greek. And Icarus is not a king. Icarus represents the shadow side of solar energy. And this desire to fly too close to the sun. So Icarus was the son of Daedalus, and he was trapped on an island trying to get away. I believe that is part of the Mannonian mysteries and the Crete. And flying too close to the sun represents overreaching and buying our own self-aggrandizement and our own hubris. And this leads to his downfall. And this is basically a cautionary tale that reminds us that true divinity respects natural limitations. And so being authentic to self-expression can be tempered with wisdom and be sustainable. Now here's another one that is similar. And it's the son of Phaeton. And depending on the lineage, and it goes different ways. So the older story, Phaeton is the son of Helios, the sun god, who had been taken on rides with his father and thought, wow, this looks easy. I bet I can do this. And decides to take the chariot and the horses out for a ride and flies too close to the sun. And that story ends horribly. And when Phaeton, the second one is Phaeton is the son of Apollo, the Greek pantheon, meaning the Olympian pantheon of gods. The same story is he thought, wow, I went out with my dad. That looks easy. Imagine a reality show like American Idol or X Factor, that sort of thing. And inevitably on those shows, there's always going to be those people who will turn up and are convinced they're very gifted because their friends and relatives might have said, you have a good voice, or you can do this thing quite nicely, and that sort of thing. And so some of those assessments are meant to be kind because they're friends and family. It's healthy for a friend and a family to believe that you're very talented when in fact, this may not be so. Their assessments are not meant to be taken as 100% objective. But the reason why I mention this is because it's a great example of Leo energy. It's the belief that something is easier than it actually is and requires less craft, and we are equal to the task even though we've had very little instruction on the matter. So it's that person who comes in convinced that they can sing they have a great voice and can sing, and then they start singing, and you're just like, I think this is too much song for you, friend. You should have chosen something more in line with what you can sing, more in line with what you can perform safely at this level of your journey. And we then watched the fireworks that ensue when this person in question doesn't get the validation they were seeking. Another card about external validation is also the Six of Wands, which is also about external validation, I've just said. So sometimes external validation, whilst beautiful, can blind us. Our desire to get it at all costs can sometimes make us blind to the need to develop skills, or the need to have more patience, and the need to look beyond the kind words of ourselves, because we are always kind to ourselves. We have what is called a positivity bias, meaning that we have a tendency to see ourselves in a positive light and to attribute far more kinder and more positive motivations than actually might be true, simply because it's us. We have a tendency to be kind to ourselves. That sort of kindness is an evolutionary advantage, because if we didn't have it, we might not have thought, hey, it's probably a good idea to feed myself today or continue doing things to help me survive. So that is also Leo energy. So it is tempering, it is authentic self-expression, must be tempered with the wisdom in order for it to be sustainable. And this story that I just shared about, X Factor or American Idol or World Idol, whatever they call it now, those sort of shows and that sort of experience illuminates the fact that we need to temper our self-picture, our self-concept, symbolized by the sun, with understanding our natural limits, if we want to be healthy and sustainable. So, we can hold the magnificent, we can hold our power, we can hold our vulnerability in the same vessel that is us. Now, the alchemy of genuine self-love, perhaps Leo's most profound teaching, is that true self-love transcends ego. And by ego, I mean those traits that are in and of themselves are not harmful. It is when they are used incorrectly, at times when we are stressed, distracted, burnt out, etc. etc. is when those things are most likely to happen. And so it is transcending those shadow traits through radical authenticity. So it's not about just shallow self-esteem, just saying an affirmation and thinking that's all I need to do to navigate best. Now, affirmations, no shade on that. That's not the point. The point is, it is not the only tool available. We have other tools too, and can be a toxic positivity if all we do is focus on the affirmation and we don't respect natural limits. So I may want to fly, I may want to be bird-like, but I cannot jump from my second story window safely without injury, because my arms are not going to move fast enough and are not made to catch the draft that wind naturally has. That's what feathers do. They catch the wind and the currents so you can fly on it. Me flapping hard isn't going to do that. The reason why I mention that is because my ego, meaning that part of me is convinced I can do it, might really well say, hey, we can do this, flapping our arms. I mean, we've got those latissimus dorsi muscles. Those are kind of like wings. I could flap that and maybe fly, As lovely as that sounds, and I really would love to fly, I'm not willing to risk my physical well-being and my mental well-being in order to test out that theory. And so that is respecting the natural limit, meaning that gravity is a real thing and I don't actually have wings, okay? And so when we're looking for self-esteem, that self-esteem cannot just depend on achievement or approval. there must be a recognition deep within our souls, our spirits, that our inherent worthiness exists prior to all of that. So we are not worthy because we made this amount of money. We are not worthy because we married this type of person. We are not worthy because we live in this house, drive this car, and live in this lovely neighborhood in this particular city at this particular time. We are worthy previous to all of that. All of that is an addition. Our worth is inherent. And that's something we must nurture throughout our lives, because it's not something our culture teaches us is that we have naturally with ease. It's something we have to claim every day and practice every day. And so the chemical process of Leo involves transforming lead. So the lead of arrogance, the lead of self-importance into the gold of genuine presence, meaning that I am important, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you. And if we are all important, then no one actually is important. So it's kind of a paradox. We're all important, and yet no one is important. Because in order for us to have important people, we must also have people who are not important. And so it's an egalitarian type of vibe here. And when we fully inhabit our center, we become more connected to everything around us. And so the sun in our charts, and therefore the Leo parts, is to be able to share and our abundance, our magnificence, our beneficence with others without feeling depletion. And that is intelligence, creative intelligence. It's the understanding that, yes, there are limits, and if you want to share things without depletion, you must be aware. You must understand when sharing, when you can share, and when you haven't, meaning you are well rested, well fed, well sustained emotionally in your relationships, socially, spiritually, soulfully. All of that is, most days, you've got that sorted and can then give from a place of abundance. But in times of stress, in times of illness, in times of injury, etc., that well that cope within us might very well be depleted, and that would be not the ideal time to share of ourselves. So we can discover that our creative energy multiplies when shared rather than hoarded, because we live in currently a moving toward post-scarcity society. We are currently still in the late stages of a scarcity-based society. So this is the mystery at the heart of Leo's generosity. It is knowing. It's the wisdom to know when to share, because I have the resources and I'm well resourced and healthy, and I can share in a healthy and beneficial way, and knowing when I am not well resourced, I'm feeling depleted, and I cannot share in a way that's going to benefit myself and others. It is a both and. Leo is both and. Where Gemini gets us into the either or, Cancer takes us into the liminal between those two states, and then we arrive at Leo where it's a both and thing. I don't have to choose between this or that. I can have this and that. Okay? And so I think that just about does it for today, this episode. And so we have completed our exploration of Leo's radiant realm, and so we want to consider that sovereignty is not something that we can achieve. It's something that we can recall. And so the throne that we seek, however you might define throne, because a throne is merely a target to shoot at or to aim at, and that it has always been ours. It's not something that, it's not about dominating others. It is the center point of being authentic. And so the key takeaway here is our creative expression is not a luxury. It's not an indulgence. It's our primary offering to a world or to a cosmos in need of genuine light. Okay? One last thing. We are on Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and you can find those notes in those links in the show notes. There is a newsletter on Substack. That link is also in the show notes. There is a free and paid version. So, thank you very much, star people, for tuning in. I appreciate you. If this episode has sparked something within you, I invite you to commit to one act of courageous self-expression this week. Something that feels both frightening and resonant and true. Okay, so until our next cosmic conversation, may you wear your crown with both pride and humility. This has been APM. This is the Outlaw Astrology Podcast, where we don't just interpret the stars, we embody their wisdom. Shine on, star people. Peace and astro magic.